Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Byron York, as usual, joins me today. And Byron, let's talk about the big event of the week, which was Donald Trump's speech to the United Nations. You told me earlier that it was epic. Why was it epic?
Well, I've rarely, first of all, it was kind of long. It was nearly an hour long, but I've rarely seen a speech that so frankly addressed the problems of the world with a president explaining mostly to his allies where he thinks they have gone wrong.
Today, just 8 months into my administration, we are the hottest country anywhere in the world, and there is no other country even close. America is blessed with the strongest economy, the strongest borders, the strongest military, the strongest friendships, and the strongest spirit of any nation on the face of the earth. This is indeed the golden age of America.
And there was a good bit of talk about war and peace, and there was news, from the president's appearance at the UN, in which he seems open to the idea of NATO and the United States helping NATO help Ukraine actually win the war with Russia and with all of its previous territory intact. That was a kind of a shocker that came from Trump out of that. But the speech was mostly about what he really called the sort of the twin threats against Europe, and he said they were migration and energy, and basically a migration policy that has enormously changed the population of some Western European countries. He had some really interesting statistics about the percentage of prisoners who are incarcerated in some Western European nations, well over 50% being foreign-born, and suggesting that that those countries are actually importing crime this way, pointing to his performance in the United States of essentially just cutting off the flow of illegal crossers at the U.S.-Mexico border. And then on energy, really going slamming Europe for its commitment to renewable green energy, saying it's just impractical, doesn't not dependable enough, and costs too much, and makes them dependent on bad people like the Russians.
Right.
So it was really a very frankly worded speech.
Yeah, and it was the thing that I took from it was that there was very substantive criticism of the countries that he wants particularly to do well, the European countries. He said he loved Europe, but that the countries of Europe were being very badly run. But he also turned his attention to the UN as an organization, saying that it wasn't living up to its potential. He thought it had great potential, but it wasn't living up to it. And I think it's something that a lot of our viewers will either not remember or will not even have been alive to have seen, that in the early days, the General Assembly was very much on America's side. It was small nations that actually gave extra weight to the United States when it was dealing with recalcitrant members of the Security Council, like the Soviet Union and China. But now the General Assembly has become a kind of a forum for small, dysfunctional, often tyrannical states to try and stick it to Uncle Sam and to express their distaste. So you can see why he was also telling the United Nations that it really needed to reform, can't you?
Yeah, I think that was a very good description of what was going on. The subtext, in Trump's facial expressions and what he said, everything was, look, I know you don't like me,
Right.
but I'm telling you, you got to do this. Your nations are going to hell. You need to change before you get there. And I'm trying to help. I do think a subtext of it was I'm trying to help,
Right.
and it clearly probably a very hostile audience, maybe counting down the days till Trump will leave office. But in terms of migration and in energy, and Trump was, by the way, said a few things in favor of nuclear energy, so he wasn't suggesting that everybody in Europe throw away all their renewables and not have any power at all.
Right.
And he's also big on coal, which he insists in calling clean, beautiful coal. That is coal that really you can generate energy from it a lot more cleanly than you could a decade or two ago.
Right, right. There was an extraordinary incident when he and the First Lady arrived at the UN, when they stepped onto an escalator which was moving and suddenly it stopped. Now, it was reported by the Times of London before that incident took place that there were people at the UN kind of somewhat jokingly saying, oh, when he arrives, we should just turn the escalators off and pretend that we ran out of money. But then it actually happened. So there is some suspicion that it was a revealing way. It revealed the way that the sort of petty vindictiveness against Trump that people at the UN like to express. They like to be contemptuous of Trump. It would certainly, if it were deliberate, have been an insult to both Trump and the First Lady, and indeed to the American people. And Carolyn Levitt at the White House said, if that were the case, then the people responsible should be fired. This really does that sort of pettiness really gets to the antagonism between the United States and the rest of the world as collected at the UN, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it could also be dangerous, by the way, if you've ever been on an elevator that's moving and then jolts to a stop, you could fall.
Right,
So that could have been, at the very least, an embarrassing scene for the
right,
president and the first lady. Now, the UN Secretary General's office explained the problem in this way. They said that a White House photographer who was up ahead on the escalator, up ahead of the president, who was actually climbing with his back to the top, kind of going backward up the stairs too, so he could photograph the president, accidentally, inadvertently set off a safety measure that stops the escalator. So that's their explanation. But in light of the Times of London report that you mentioned, and also in light of the fact that the president's teleprompter happened to just fail for the
right.
first 10 minutes, leaving him kind of high and dry for the first 10 minutes of his speech.
And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter because the teleprompter is not working.
And you got to think that the president's thinking, I'm in New York City. I'm
Right.
in the United States, but I am not in friendly territory
Right,
here.
right. Senator Mike Lee has a bill in Congress to defund or to remove U.S. funds from the United Nations, which accounts for about 25% of its money. What he said was, these nations, the United Nations, they hate us for free. We don't have to pay them to do that, which is a nice way of putting it. But, and President Trump also, he pointed out that the United Nations doesn't just fail to fix some problems, but it actually makes many of them worse. Notably, of course, it enables the terrorist indoctrination of Palestinian children in Gaza. The United Nations refuses to cooperate with Israel and the United States in the distribution of food. UN schools have been used as military bases by the United Nations, by Hamas. And so he pointed those things out, but at the same time, or just shortly after the speech, he spoke with the United Nations Secretary General, and he seemed much more supportive. So where do things stand, do you think, is the administration, does it want to stay engaged with the United Nations? Is it heading for a kind of clash? Is there even any chance of Mike Lee's bill, having some sort of momentum on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think I might speak differently of the president himself and the administration. I think there's some people in the administration who would probably like to get out of the United Nations. I don't get that sense from Donald Trump himself. He is a native New Yorker. Since 1945, the United Nations has been there. It's a big part of every year in New York, the General Assembly. And he actually, in his speech, in one of his off the cuff moments, he talked about when he was a developer
Right.
bidding to renovate the UN building. And he said he could have had beautiful marble floors here if I had done it, for half the price.
Right.
So,
Right.
so it's something he speaks with some actual affection for. So
Right.
I just don't see him wanting to withdraw. I do see an approach, maybe something like we saw with USAID in the administration, which is look at the good things that are being done and
Right.
try to keep doing those and get rid of all the rest.
Right.
I do think on the issue that you mentioned of U.S. support to the United Nations, why are we paying them for hating us so much?
Right. Right. So, Byron, let's switch subjects to Kamala Harris, who is out trying to flog her book, The 107 Days. It seems like she really wanted to settle some petty scores, didn't it?
She really did. I've seen some descriptions of this book of saying it's scorched earth and that Harris attacks some fellow Democrats. And we're talking about Josh Shapiro and Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer and a few possible other rivals in 2028. And, it's not scorched earth. And these aren't really attacks.
Right.
They're slights, they're slurs. It's really minor stuff. It's the expression on Governor Shapiro's face when he came in, or it's the way that he reacted when a Harris staffer told him to do something. I mean, it's really minor stuff. And so you think to yourself, is this score settling? Why is she even doing this?
Yeah.
And I think the big picture impression you get, especially from this conversation we're having, is that Trump is doing really big things on a global scale.
Right.
And Kamala Harris is kind of sniping at her at people she doesn't like.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get a bigger contrast between the two candidates in the 2024 presidential race.
Final question, Byron, and it relates again to Kamala Harris, and I think you're right. There's extraordinary pettiness there, but it seems as though, I mean, perhaps she never had a chance of winning the Democratic primary in a full primary season. But just kind of gratingly irritating and paying off some sort of petty scores. Perhaps it was always a no-hope thing, but I mean, this surely just makes her anathema to the party anyway, doesn't it?
It does. It does. First of all, the Democratic Party does not like to renominate former nominees who have lost. You just don't do it. I think you have to go back to Adlai Stevenson in the 1950s to see him do that, and I think they swore off it at that point.
Right.
So they just don't do it. So if you lose, if you're the party standard bearer and you lose, that's it for you. You don't get another chance.
Right.
And so that gets rid of her right there. And second of all, there are so many Democrats who thought she did not do a good job. Now, the title of the book is 107 days, meaning that she didn't have enough time to run a winning candidacy. And if it had been 214 days, it still would have been a terrible campaign because she was a bad candidate.
Right.
And I think that if you listen to what Democrats are saying on and off the record around the country, they are really ready to move on. They realize that, they thought they should have been able to defeat Donald Trump in 2024. They didn't. And they really feel like they have to fix their problems. And the candidate who lost in 24 is not the vehicle to do that.
Right, right. So the Democrats are going to move on. We're going to move on now, Byron. Thank you very much indeed for joining me today and going through these really interesting issues. Thank you also to the viewers. Join us again next time on Political Perspectives.